On December 21st, 2012, a civilization-altering development will jam up our credit lines, mute the roar of our mighty military engine, topple the world's biggest monopoly, and send shockwaves across markets. This is the first time in 17 years that I've made such a shocking announcement. The last time I made an announcement like this, I put the media on trial for treason and exposed what became one of the greatest political and financial stories of the time. But since then, I've made it a point to stay behind the scenes. But know this, ever since being a college mate of Bill Clinton's back at Oxford in the 60s, I have had the good fortune, though oft-times misfortune, to befriend and brush shoulders with many of the world's most powerful men, and many of the world's richest families, including figures like George Bush Sr., Steve Forbes, Margaret Thatcher, John Brown, Sir Roger Douglas, Boris Yeltsin, to name but a few. I also predicted that some of these figures would change the course of history long before the world got whiff of their names. I have also been the secret man behind some of the biggest movements and most successful companies in America today. And everyone from the World Bank to heads of state, Washington bigwigs to big oil, SARS to CEOs, have sought out my advice. In fact, in one of my favorite reviews to date, the famous internet billionaire Peter Thiel of PayPal and Facebook fame recently wrote me and said, "I am an extremely big fan of your writings, which have shaped my thinking about the markets and the macro world as a whole, perhaps more than anything else. But today, something so big has begun to happen that I've decided to come out of retirement and reveal my true identity for the first time on this scale. By December 21st, I predict everything will be different." Recently, I've learned of a pivotal development that was set into motion just weeks ago now on a little-known island in the Persian Gulf that has already begun to set off what could turn out to be the most violent economic reversal America has ever known. By the time it's done, everything will be different. It will be an event that will impact almost every aspect of your life: where you live, how you live, where you go on vacation, the car you drive, the way you invest, the food you eat, the products you buy, maybe even the contents of your prayers. Yet despite the importance of this recent development, not one major Western media outlet, bar the Telegraph in Britain, covered the story. But you will hear about it here for the first time. So destabilizing is this event that the biggest names in politics and finance have tried everything in their power to prevent it, and for some years they succeeded. But due to America's weakening economic and military muscle, we are finally coming up against resistance from our neighbors and trading partners. For generations, it appeared that the empire's power and reach knew no bounds. But in the past few years, we have been crushed under the monumental financial stress of policing the globe, launching failed wars, securing oil and other strategic assets, bailing out buddies and zombie banks. And this has all been at a time when our Social Security and Medicare costs are skyrocketing, and our tax revenues and T-bill sales are plummeting. In short, we have lost our leverage. We have reached the physical limit on our exercise of power, and we are no longer having as much success at bullying the world into getting what we want, whether it be oil, gas, credit, trading agreements, or any other such strategic assets. Our bloated empire is starting to feel the pains and consequences of her crimes of consumption. But now, since we are losing the war on the physical front, our leaders are igniting a new war on the cyber front, employing virtual vandalism and other acts of infoterrorism in order to delete any kind of evidence that might suggest that major swings in sentiment are occurring right now in the demand for America's most powerful investment. even going so far as to propose censorship laws so draconian that it has moved China and more than 10,000 internet sites, including ones as big and as powerful as Wikipedia, to strike out against them. But I have tapped into my contacts and my sources from across the global geopolitical plains and gathered inside intelligence from some of the highest offices and from some of the biggest money movers and shakers in the business. And I have uncovered the pivotal development that I believe is about to change everything. By December 21st, civilization may confront its greatest crisis ever. It's why I've been impelled to return from retirement, for I have been warning this day would arrive for many years now. And I have returned to the public eye to complete the job I began long ago. It will be the fulfillment of my life's work. It's why I founded institutions like the National Taxpayers Union, Agora Publishing, and Newsmax. It's why I advocated through 8 administrations, and why I helped move 32 states to call for a balanced budget amendment to the U.S. Constitution. A change which, if it had not been squelched by Washington's powerful lobby groups, could have spared you from the terrible day of reckoning that may only be weeks away now. And though this day will usher in one of the most tumultuous transitions in all of human history, it doesn't mean you have to get crushed by it. If you understand the events going on in the world at the moment, including the fundamental reasons that are driving them, then you need not panic. You can start preparing right now for the cataclysmic upheaval ahead. While you may have to do some immediate and dramatic repositioning of your portfolio, and maybe even your life, you could stand to reap great rewards in the era ahead. In fact, I believe more money will be lost and made in the 18 months following this event than ever before. And in this video, I'll tell you how it will be done. I'll even give you the names of some of the exact investments that I predict will be on the winning side of the equation. If you haven't guessed who I am by now, my name is James Dale Davidson. In 1984, I launched a financial newsletter called Strategic Investment with Lord William Rees-Mogg, former editor-in-chief of the Times London, vice chairman of the BBC, and confidant of powerful figures like Margaret Thatcher and Lord Rothschild. With the launch of this newsletter, I made another outrageous prediction. At the height of Soviet power, I predicted that communism would fall by the end of the decade. So radical was my forecast at the time that it was rendered rank nonsense by the guardians of conventional thinking. A reviewer in Newsweek dismissed it as an unthinking attack on reason, and the Wall Street Journal categorically denounced it as no more than the natterings of a dopey ant. Then on January 1st, 1989, I told my sometimes friend Bill Clinton, we had the same tutor at Oxford, and a room full of other skeptical political titans, that the Berlin Wall would soon fall. To the shock of almost the entire planet, on the eve of the new decade, the wall came down, and revolution swept away communist regimes from Budapest to Bucharest. This was an event that, according to the so-called experts, no one could have predicted. Yet for readers of Strategic Investment, it came as no surprise at all. In fact, we had been preparing for this momentous event for the better part of the decade. We knew exactly why communism was doomed to collapse. We also knew that when it did, that although it would be seen by many as a triumphant event, it would also cause violent disruptions in the global marketplace and alter the equation of the game for many an economic player. And if you weren't on the right side of this shift, you might find yourself scrambling for new meaning and methods in an entirely new world order. But if you were on the right side, you could seize opportunities that only come along once or maybe twice in a century. I come to you today to make the same kind of polarizing market prediction I made back then. And although I'm sure the media mafia will once again be swift to reject my proclamation, I implore you to hear me out and listen to my reasoning. For the mainstream media's employees are like birds skimming for bugs on the surface of the water, shying too far away from the deeper currents and undertows to know, care, or dare where they are tending. But at strategic investment, we are like marine biologists, diving deep to discover the secrets beneath the surface. And we do it by applying a completely novel approach to the art of forecasting. It's an approach we call megapolitics. Lord William Rees-Mogg and I first invented the theory of megapolitics in the 80s, and it is one on which we have based all our forecasts to date, including the ones we set out in our 3 best-selling books, Blood in the Streets, The Great Reckoning, and The Sovereign Individual. And we believe it is the reason behind our success, and the reason why we've been able to predict and even profit off events that others claimed were impossible. And why everyone from the World Bank to heads of state, from the titans of yesterday to the titans of today, have subscribed to our advice. It's how we predicted Black Monday over 6 months before it happened. We warned readers that America would soon experience another 1929-style stock market crash that would catch investors with the shock of their lives, erasing virtually overnight all the profits and more that it had taken them the better part of the decade to gain. Experts were almost unanimous in denying such a thing could happen. Caught in the throes of what was at the time our greatest market boom ever, they refused to see reason. But come October 1987, world markets began to hemorrhage in what became the most violent sell-off of the century. It's how we predicted the Japanese Depression of the 90s and 2000s. Once again, at the height of the unprecedented Japanese stock and real estate market boom of the 80s, experts got completely blinded by Japan's rising sun. In fact, the consensus was almost unanimous. Japan was about to take over the world. We said otherwise. We forecast that it would slip into a deep depression from which it would be difficult to return. We even went so far as to say that Japan's stock market crash would match or exceed the 89% loss that Wall Street suffered after its 1929 crash. Decades later, Japan's stock market is still 80% off its 1989 high. It's how we predicted the rise of a whole new wave of Islamic terrorism in the 90s and 2000s, and how it would displace Marxism as the new ideology of confrontation with the West. This again was at a time when no one wanted to hear it, let alone report on it. And we forecast that they wouldn't really start hearing about it until our tallest buildings were toppled. Once again, this was a mega-political event that we knew would impact global markets on a profound scale, and for which few would be prepared. Caught atop the dizzying heights of the dot-com boom, no one could even see that war was brewing on the geopolitical ground, let alone understand the profound implications it would have on their investments. But a momentous reversal in sentiment was about to occur, as new economy-type stocks were about to be dumped for strategic assets. War and oil would become the new names of the game again. It's how we predicted the micro-media revolution. And in my book, The Sovereign Individual, published on the eve of the millennium, I made sweeping predictions about how the rise of the Internet and other such micromedia technologies would have the power to subvert and destroy the macro state, and redefine media and life at the margin. The events I wrote about in my book back then are beginning to unfold right now at a breathtaking pace. This is the power of megapolitics. And once you understand the theory behind it, you'll start to see the world as it really is. Megapolitics is the prism through which we look back into the past, so that we can peer into the future. I'll tell you about this radical new way of looking at the world in this video. Armed with this unique and powerful forecasting tool, the mysteries of the market's muddied waters will start to clear, and the geopolitical and economic fog will begin to lift. By understanding the fundamental reasons that drive economies and shape markets, you can take back control of your life and your finances. The biggest moment in megapolitics may be just weeks away now. In an overlooked article published in the Tehran Times on January 12, 2012, Iran, the world's second-largest oil producer, made a shocking announcement, one that Western media establishment has suppressed. It stated that starting this Iranian calendar year, which begins March 20th, Iran would make its first dramatic move away from the petrodollar. This is a game-changing move, one that I believe will spread around the world like wildfire, and which I predict by the end of fall will bring an end to the 39-year secular bull market in dollars. America's most popular investment will have finally reached its use-by date. And the consequences for every single American will be so dire, it will be difficult at first to accept, let alone believe. It's why Washington has spent over 10 years and $4 trillion trying to thwart it. And until recently it succeeded, if only just. The preservation of petrodollar power was the real reason we went to war with Iraq. It is the real reason behind all the strife we are igniting today with Iran. It's the real reason why all our trade and economic, information, and military wars are now reaching a boiling point. It's the real reason why, in yet another history-making event, Wikipedia and over 10,000 other websites recently went dark. And it's the real reason why the wife of my sometimes friend Bill Clinton and current Secretary of State is trying to create draconian laws that, if passed, would deliver a terrible blow against the freedom of information, and why Hillary recently announced that we are in an information war, and we are losing that war. In the past, Western media outlets enjoyed a monopoly on the coverage of world news. But today, a growing number of viewers from across the world tune into various alternative foreign media outlets to get a fresh take on current events. It's a numbers game, and we are clearly losing that game. For instance, the most striking example of this comes from the launch of the RT media empire, which within just 7 years has become the most dominant and pervasive force in media of all time. RT stands for Russia Today. It currently holds a record number of viewers on YouTube, boasting over 2/3 of a billion hits. CNN International, in contrast, is struggling to reach an audience of just 1% of RT's size. And more viewers in Washington and New York today tune into the English version of RT than tune into almost any other foreign-based international news channel. The days of American media monopolies are over. I predicted 25 years ago that this mega-political event would occur, long before the producers of these alternative media empires had even graduated from high school. But mark my words, it is merely the symptom, and not the cause, of the real transformation that is going on in the world right now. And while this transformation will bring great peril, it will also bring great promise. And for those who keep listening, an opportunity for great profits too. The petrodollar was the ultimate monopoly. The petrodollar was a game-changing deal that Washington made with OPEC 39 years ago. At the time, OPEC wanted to create a petrocurrency in which to trade its oil. This currency, however, was to be made up of a basket of currencies, which, although was to include the dollar, was also to include gold, the Japanese yen, the French franc, the British pound, and the German mark. America had recently hit peak oil and had abandoned the gold standard. After racking up enormous debts on a failed war, Vietnam, we were fast running out of oil, of gold, and of money. And the inflation monster, which had barely raised its head since World War II, was suddenly back from the grave, terrorizing the streets again. Plus, our supremacy was being challenged by the remarkable rise of the emerging markets of the East, like Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan. Something had to be done, and the powers that be spied an ingenious little way to keep the empire's engine running. President Nixon convinced King Faisal of Saudi Arabia to accept U.S. dollars and only dollars as payment for oil. In exchange, he pledged to protect the Saudi monarchy and all its oil fields from anyone who might choose to seize them, enemies like the Soviet Union, Libya, and Israel, and many other interested parties. The king agreed, and by 1975, he had got all the other OPEC members to agree too. The petrodollar was born, and so successful was it that it made the dollar go viral and mounted capitalism's biggest monopoly ever. It was a mega political innovation that won for the empire and each and every citizen in it all kinds of special privileges. Megapolitics are the big events that change history. They are usually either a technological or monetary innovation that tip the balance of power into the hands of its creators and alter the equation of the game. Two of the greatest megapolitical innovations of all time were gunpowder and Gutenberg's printing press. But they were technological innovations. The petrodollar is a monetary innovation, but its impact in the last 39 years has been equally as powerful. It was the deal that would rewrite history and shift the balance of power back heavily into America's favor. What it did was essentially create a 39-year secular bull market for dollars, as all oil-importing countries would now have to stuff their central bank vaults full of dollars so they could pay for their oil. Now, in order to acquire those dollars, they would either have to borrow them off America, or they would have to work for it by manufacturing and selling all manner of goods and products to us. The Japanese sold us Kawasaki's and luxury cars. The Taiwanese sold us TVs, telephones, and electronics. The South Koreans sold us air conditioners, fridges, washing machines, and all manner of modern conveniences. And the Chinese sold us toys and trinkets, gadgets and gizmos. And while all these foreign oil-importing nations had to toil through sweat, blood, and tears to earn their petrodollars in order to pay for their oil, we merely had to print them. A new world war was launched. But this war wasn't a military one fought with guns and grenades. This one was a consumer war, fought with low-cost, unskilled labor and mega manufacturing plants. The goal was to simply win the custom of the American consumer. The reward was not kingdoms and countries or gold and precious metals, but rather it was merely paper dollars, printed without limit, at virtually no cost, by the only institution in the world with the power to do so, the Federal Reserve. It became like Christmas every day for the American consumer. Santa would arrive at ports all over America with sea containers full of all sorts of goodies and gadgets made by his worker elves at home and sold at mercifully modest cost to the American consumer. But it wasn't just cheap goods that Americans won. We also won cheap credit. You see, all these nations who were competing to sell goods to us began to accumulate vast stores of surplus dollars in their vaults. And rather than let these dollars just sit there and gather dust, they decided to lend them back to America and collect the albeit pithy, yet better than nothing interest rate we gave them on the loan. And thus the phenomenon, now infamously known as petrodollar recycling, was born. And it was this phenomenon that gave birth to our unprecedented 30-year secular bull market in U.S. bonds. One Warren Buffett is quoted to have dubbed as one of the most extraordinary bubbles in financial history. A bubble, by the way, that is just moments away from bursting, with terrifying implications for every single American, particularly retirees and baby boomers, whose pension funds and retirement accounts are simply stuffed with them. whether they know it or not. I'll tell you how to prepare for the bursting of the American bond bubble in just a moment. The petrodollar privilege had power. In short, the petrodollar allowed us to live beyond our means, print unlimited amounts of money at virtually no cost, spend more than we earned, consume more than we produced, import more than we exported. It allowed us to borrow excessive amounts of money at obscenely low rates and build up enormous trade and budget deficits with few adverse effects. It allowed us to build a mighty military machine and undertake expensive missions right round the globe. We expanded our empire and extended its reign. Seen in this light, the importance of the petrodollar comes into perspective. You can see why we would be prepared to go to war over it. The petrodollar is now the last thread that is holding the American empire together. But it's about to go poof. Capitalism is about to find itself without a currency. Iran has announced its historic launch of the world's first commodity exchange that will trade oil in currencies other than the US dollar. This will mark OPEC's latest attempt to move away from the petrodollar. In fact, in 2006, a report titled Iran Next U.S. Target cited the launch of this exchange as America's #1 threat, hailing it to be the real economic weapon of mass destruction. The report was voted by alternative media outlet Project Censored as one of the top 10 censored stories of the year. By 2008, despite all U.S. efforts to crush it, Iran managed to successfully and silently get a version of this exchange up and running. This first version of it, however, was merely to establish its validity on global commodity markets. So rather than actively engage in petrodollar warfare with America by selling its oil and gas in other non-dollar denominated currencies, it merely offered petroleum-based products instead. But this year, that is set to change. Iran's oil bourse will offer oil on the open market for the first time in currencies other than the US dollar. This is the real reason why we are levying sanctions on Iran and anyone else who dares do business with them. This is the real reason why we're sending warships to the Strait of Hormuz and why we're accusing Iran of building weapons of mass destruction. But it doesn't make sense. The IAEA, International Atomic Energy Association, has just completed a full inspection of Iran's nuclear capabilities and confirmed that there is no evidence Iran has decided to actually build nuclear weapons. What's more, we have 2,150 nuclear warheads, and even by the most ambitious of estimates, it would take Iran about 10 years to build 2 at most. And if Iran's 2 nuclear warheads by 2020 are so dangerous, then why have we allowed North Korea and Pakistan to build literally hundreds of them? So now Washington is bullying the entire globe to boycott all trade with Iran. But that doesn't make sense either. For example, Iran has been trading with mega economies like India, Japan, and South Korea for over 2 decades. These are not relationships that are going to be severed anytime soon by third-party sanctions. They've been trading over hundreds of billions of dollars worth of oil and other commodities with Asia alone for a long time, not to mention dozens of other nations. Iranian oil is an integral part of many nations' lifeblood. And while America is running around bullying everyone with sanctions and saber-rattling, nations the globe over are quietly and silently doing their own private little deals. Deals that are collectively worth over $1 trillion. The world has begun to blindside the dollar. China, Russia, Brazil, Venezuela, Argentina, South Africa, Malaysia, Indonesia, South Korea, Colombia, to name but a few, are all doing direct deals and swaps with one another. They're basically blindsiding the dollar. For example, The dollar is drowned in the Yellow Sea. Hands down, Japan and China landed the biggest punch to the petrodollar in December 2011, when the two G20 giants announced plans to dump the dollar and trade only in yuan and yen. Value, minimum $339 billion. The BRICS are now glued together. Brazil, Russia, India, and China, South Africa too, agreed to establish mutual lines of dollar-free credit. According to IMF figures, value $170 billion. You'll hear of Asian contagion no more. Watch out for the Chiang Mai Multilateralized Initiative. It is already in effect, and it links the economies of the 10 Asian nations, plus China, Japan, South Korea, and the Monetary Authority of Hong Kong, in a super liquid juggernaut kitty of non-dollar credit and local currencies. Value, $120 billion. Weeks ago, tsunami tattered Japan through India a $15 billion lifeline. This little agreement gives India immediate access to $15 billion worth of yen to help it buy its Iranian oil. And the Silk Road is now being paved with yuan and dirhams. On Tuesday, January 17, 2012, China threw the dollar into one more ditch when it penned yet another greenback-less agreement, this time with the United Arab Emirates. Value, $5.5 billion. And this is just one of more than 10 such deals that we've seen inked by the Asian giant in recent years. The world has begun to enter an unprecedented new era of monetary cooperation. Instead of raising voices and guns, they are raising solutions. And U.S. sanctions to curb the flow of Iranian oil are now hitting a kink. Though you won't hear about this from the mainstream media, where the word petrodollar has been practically banned since 2007. But the word petrodollar and the details of new swap lines are bandied about every day on alternative media stations like RT, Al Jazeera, and China Central Television. And this is just the beginning. Commerce is freeing itself of fiat currencies. We are re-entering a new era of barter and exchange. To circumvent U.S. sanctions, Iran and China, even back in 2010, started their own little oil for refineries program. You see, Iran is not only far from atomic, it's also far from modern. With its creaky and crumbling infrastructure, OPEC's second largest oil and gas producer can't even refine its most abundant natural resource, crude oil. To this day, it still has to export nearly all of its crude and later import it back as gasoline, kerosene, and other petroleum products. And they usually do this at a loss. What's more, it has new super fields that were discovered in 1999 that have boosted its country's proven reserves to 150 billion barrels. But this little asset has still hardly been developed. So as China's thirst for Iranian oil continues to grow, 49% last year alone, and trade mechanisms to pay for it keep getting cut off, the two are swapping oil for infrastructure. China's already signed up to build what will become two of the largest oil projects Iran's seen in years. And this is just one example where the dollar has been cut out of foreign trade and has been replaced by good old barter and exchange. Iran's oil swaps with various nations are projected to reach 500,000 barrels per day, once the third phase of an ambitious plan to further barter and refine oil is completed. That's more energy than the Department of Defense, the world's largest single oil consumer, burns each day. These new pumps and pipelines are slated to come online in the next 12 months. But it's not only foreigners that are dumping the dollar. Americans, displeased with Washington's fiscal recklessness, are dumping it too. A recent report in the New York Times has announced the birth of an entirely new currency in the U.S., the Berkshire. Also, Jim Rogers, one of the world's shrewdest investors, has denounced the dollar too, saying if something isn't done soon to resurrect it, it will lead to a huge decline in the standard of living of U.S. citizens, like nothing we've seen in nearly a century. And Bill Gross, the world's biggest bond investor, has advised all his clients that if they had just one investment idea, it should be an investment in a non-dollar, non-euro currency. As Brazilian economist and strategist Ricardo C. Amaral recently said, the U.S. dollar served its purpose since the end of World War II and became the major foreign exchange reserve currency. But the days of the U.S. dollar playing that special role has reached the end of the line. Today that system is very sick. The fiats are falling. But all this is part of a much wider trend. One I predicted would occur in my book The Sovereign Individual in 1998. In this book I alerted readers that we were about to go from an era of macrostates to microstates, macrocurrencies to microcurrencies. In Europe in the 16th century, there were literally thousands of forms of exchange and thousands of states, feudal systems. Now Europe is down to 16 major states and one major currency. But I believe the trend is about to reverse. In fact, just like the breakup of the Soviet Union, so too will we now see the breakup of the European Union and of the euro. But the greatest and most shocking event of all, the one that most Americans will not even be able to imagine, let alone believe, will be the breakup of our own confederacy, and of our own currency, and of capitalism itself. Sure, the word will be bandied about, but it will take on a whole new form. I'll tell you about that new form in a moment. But first let me show you how to make yourself a bundle from the coming crash of the petrodollar. An investment I believe will go down as the biggest squeeze play in market history. I'm about to smash one of the market's biggest myths. Most investors believe the best way to make money is to get in on an investment when it is soaring. On the contrary, the best and quickest way to make money is not when it is soaring, but when it is crashing. This is what I call a squeeze play. Squeeze plays come at moments in history when sentiment shifts, when the crowd realizes it got it wrong, and the market all piles out of an investment at once, selling in a frenzy, like when investors dumped tulips in 1637, railroad stocks in 1873, shares in 1929, bonds in 1981, tech stocks in 2000, banking stocks in 2008. These dates mark the end of some of history's most irrational manias. For those who pinpoint the timing of these frenzies and identify the setups that are leading to these volatile moments before they happen, by betting against them, you can realize a decade's gains in just months. In the past few decades, savvy investors who watch countries like Mexico, Argentina, and Turkey start to crumble could have made profits of as much as 838%, 1,471%, and 1,255% in as little as 6 months, just by betting against these countries' currencies. You could turn $50,000 into $120,000 in no time flat. But now the biggest squeeze play in the history of modern capitalism is about to occur. The dollar's last great crash was in the 70s. Back then you could have turned a $50,000 portfolio into $120,000 in a matter of years. And if you used a standard technique in the currency markets, you could have made 10 times that much, turning $50,000 into $1.2 million. Problem was, at the time, there was no easy way to do that. But today, you can do it at the click of a button. But this time, you won't have to wait years for those kinds of gains. You can see them in just a matter of months. But you'd better make your move before December 21st. For example, one of these investments is a specialized but simple ETF, exchange-traded fund. Its performance seeks to follow the Deutsche Bank Short US Dollar Index. It allows you to short the dollar against a basket of major currencies, which are set to rise as the petrodollar dies. The ETF is called the PowerShares DB US Dollar Index Bearish Fund, and you can buy it at the click of a button from your online brokerage account, or just call your broker. The ticker symbol is NYSEUDN. Playing this inverse ETF is one of the safest and easiest ways to profit off the death of the petrodollar. I'll tell you about many more of them in a new report I have just completed called The Death of the Petrodollar is as Good as Gold. And I'm more than happy to email you a copy of this report right away, free of charge. This is the kind of open information flow that I predicted would occur many decades ago now, and which I predicted would have the power to topple mighty monopolies, oligopolies, cartels, and even entire nation-states, and that would usher in a completely new configuration of social and economic organization. The death of the petrodollar is as good as gold. In this report, I'll show you how gold is about to become part of a whole new world monetary order. While the U.S. may have dropped the gold standard over 40 years ago, gold is the one thing that every nation still has. Hell, even Greece has gold. In fact, the bankrupt pigs, Portugal, Ireland, Italy, Greece, and Spain, have over $180 billion worth of gold in their vaults. The pigs may default on their debts, but mark my words, they'll save some ingots for their oil. Sanctions be damned. And with China-like courage, India, the world's largest democracy, is also setting the stage for a new gold standard. And in my special new report, I'll tell you all about it. I'll also tell you how to double your wealth when the bond bubble bursts. The death of the petrodollar will also mean the death of the phenomenon known as petrodollar recycling, which I explained before. This will mean the long overdue end of the 30-year secular bull market in U.S. Treasury bonds, an event that will unleash an inflationary fire that will consume millions of American savings and dollar-based assets. Retirees on fixed incomes will be hit the hardest. Most will end up on the breadlines. But there's no reason you have to join them. Investors who are well prepared should see their portfolios soar, even when almost everything else is crashing around them. I'll tell you how to be one of those well-prepared investors in this special report. I'll also tell you the little ultra-safe 7% income secret, which you can get courtesy of what's poised to be our country's first dynamic modern microstate. As the founder of the National Taxpayers Union, it's true I advocated against the gross fiscal negligence of our governors and of their imbalanced budgets. But I also learned a few loopholes hiding in their legislatures. And now in this special report, I'll show you how you can use them too. You could not only get a 7% return for the rest of your retirement days, but you'll also get many other benefits too. I'll also tell you the world's #1 income performer. It's one of the globe's strongest and most famous franchises. If you'd invested $1,000 in this company in 1957 and reinvested your dividends, you would have had over $4.6 million today. It is one of the best performing investments of all time, and the fall of the petrodollar is set to pump up this investment's already supercharged gains. No wonder it's been for a long time one of Ben Bernanke's favorite income investments. Gold, precious metals, and undervalued income investments will be among the best performers going forward, and you'll learn about many of them if you choose to claim your free copy of The Death of the Petrodollar is as Good as Gold. But even beyond these investments, there's still one more market that is poised to outshine all the rest. Business Week calls it a global commercial phenomenon. This market lies in a place you'd probably never imagine, and it is populated by people you'd probably never suspect. It's a market that is not bound by the economics of oil, nor bound by regulations and red tape. It is not dominated by monopolies and cartels and oligopolies. Here you'll find no corporate accounting scandals, no crippling taxes, no billion-dollar financial blunders, no gangs or guns, no armies or wars. And it's the offspring of a wild, freewheeling economic oasis that's actually growing at a rate faster than China. The population is exploding, and business is booming. Its parent market already hosts some of the world's biggest highways and some of the world's biggest hypermarkets, with superstores that boast extraordinary selections that are many times that of Walmart's, Target's, or Kmart's, yet prices are at a fraction of the cost. In fact, it's one of the few places where incomes are rising and prices are falling, and where businesses and social systems are opening up when the rest of the world is closing down. No wonder it is undergoing the greatest migration. The best companies and the best minds are moving in on this new phenomenon. It's an open-source, outsourced, networked, knowledge-based, innovative economy on the brink of forging an entire new form of commercialism. And while everyone from Honeywell to Walmart, Coca-Cola to Procter & Gamble races to get a piece of this emerging new market, a few dynamic new players are already dominating it. Buy them today, and you could dominate too. I'll tell you all about this dynamic new market and the players that are pioneering it in another report I've just completed, and which I'm happy to send you free of charge, called The Rise and Rise of the World's Last Great Free Market. I'll email you a copy of this report right away. This is why I've come out of retirement. People everywhere are hesitant and worried. You see it in their faces, hear it in their conversations, see it reflected in polls, and see it registered in the ballot box. Just as an invisible physical change of ions in the atmosphere signals that a thunderstorm is imminent, even before the clouds darken and lightning strikes, so too are there now premonitions in the air. One person after another, each in his own way, senses that time is running out on a dying way of life. As I talk to you now, the walls of my den are lined with diplomas, awards, and personalized photos of me with some of the mightiest mega-political figures in living memory. I'm surrounded by my gilded achievements, the snapshots from the greatest moments of my life's work, a legacy that, if I'm honest, I am quite proud of. But one thing I've learned from studying 6,000 years worth of history is that being encircled by plaques and shelves of the world's best books means nothing if they're merely part of some estate. And why just rust when things are really starting to get interesting, and when 40 years of my forecasts are coming to a head? The airplane and internet have brought us closer together, but Washington and the worker have never been further apart. This is why I'm coming out of retirement. I don't want to be tucked safely away in my home in Buenos Aires, or rambling around my vineyard in New Zealand. That's too easy. That's not what I've strived for. It's been great gravy, yes, but that's not what it's all about. It's about you, your family, your friends, your future. That's why I'm hoping you're hearing me right now. And I'd argue with Shakespeare's Hamlet, the undiscovered country is not the end, but merely the beginning. Yes, the transition ahead will be rough. Punters will guess. Politicians will lie. History will repeat. It is repeating right now. Rome is burning. But that's precisely why I'm breathing fire back into what I believe is my crowning achievement: strategic investment. In 1969, when I started airing Washington's dirty secrets, fighting for those who didn't have the sway or access that I did, I quietly questioned my role. Was I being fierce or foolish? But like all things, time did tell. Turns out, Young and Brash, along with 3 bestsellers, has led to Bold and Brazen. And now I hope that my legacy, my knowledge, my experiences, my insight, and my wisdom, which I've loved accruing and would have done regardless even if I'd amounted to little more than a penniless eccentric, has a chance to live on, not as autographs and epitaphs, but as compounding profits in your portfolio. That's why I invite you to join me now. This is why I've come out of retirement, to finish the job I began many years ago, to finish my life's work. As a subscriber to Strategic Investment, here's what you'll get. Access to what's been referred to as an investor CIA. I have sat shoulder to shoulder with figures like George Bush Sr., Steve Forbes, Margaret Thatcher, Sir Roger Douglas, Boris Yeltsin, Carlos Menem, John Brown, Bill and Hillary Clinton, to name but a few. And it is my access to powerful inside connections like these that have been the reason that Strategic Investment has often been referred to as an investor CIA. Access to the wisdom of top income, momentum, commodity and crisis investor, and Wall Street veteran, Charles Delval. Charles, like myself, is also disgusted at the way Wall Street is run, and he too looks at the world through a mega-political prism. Armed with this unique worldview and over 15 years of experience, Charles has made some fantastic calls and small fortunes for his followers. Like when he told them to buy Apple Computer in 2007, and silver since it was about $7 an ounce. He's also one of the few options traders that can boast a 100% track record for 2 years running. From Charles, you'll learn about the world's best foreign bonds, commodities, energy, income and crisis investments. He's ready to show you how to make a killing once again as blood starts to run down Wall Street. Mega political market analysis based on Lord William Rees-Mogg and my unique approach to economics and investing. Outstanding income investments. Whilst most retirees and income investors will watch their income checks wither away in the decades ahead, you won't have to. You can be enjoying an ever-rising stream of income checks by being invested safely in the income kings of tomorrow. Strategic Investment, our elite research advisory letter, packed with alternative survival of the fittest investment strategies, including inverse ETFs, emerging market investments, gold and precious metal stocks, plus stocks and strategies primed to soar in the information-rich era ahead. These are strategies that you won't find on the pages of the Wall Street Journal or The Economist. This print and online newsletter will be sent right to your physical and virtual mailbox once a month. Full access to Davidson Unplugged. Every week I have a phone call with Charles to discuss the hottest investment topics of the week. This gives us a chance to talk candidly about what's on our minds, without the limitations of writing in a print newsletter. And it gives you a deeper understanding and insight into why we believe what we do, and what factors lead us to make important investment recommendations in the future. You'll receive access to the recording and transcript for every Davidson Unplugged phone call. Urgent investment alerts, notifying you immediately of any buy-sell recommendation we make in our model portfolio. What's more, we'll also send you important news bulletins and instant alerts on any kind of mega-political event that may be impacting our portfolio. This is the kind of blue-chip type service that other investors would pay $1,000 to $5,000 for. But you'll receive all these powerful benefits as a subscriber to Strategic Investment. Email strategic dispatches. Profits don't sleep. So like our 24/7 strategic alerts, important updates could hit your inbox anytime, day or night. If you want to get in on our plays, just follow the simple instructions in our email alerts. 24/7 access to our strategic archive. Once you sign up, you'll get password-protected access to the entire gamut of strategic investment resources, including all our past and current issues and recommendations. Plus your 2 free online reports. The death of the petrodollar is as good as gold. The Rise and Rise of the Last Great Free Market. Actually, subscribe within the next 7 days, and I'll also send you another free report on megapolitics. It's called Lost for 2 Centuries, the 206-year-old investment secret that can keep you safe through the violent transition ahead. In it, you'll discover how Lord William Rees-Mogg and I many years ago dug up a lost economic classic written by an 18th century writer that led us to the invention of megapolitics, a theory that has allowed us to understand how the world really works, to understand the real forces that determine the size and shape of societies, and the real forces behind the rise and fall of empires. Much to the tragedy of the economic establishment, this remarkable old work has largely remained buried in the past, barely to have been read by a single scholar even to this day. Yet it contains clues to the origins of economic life, clues that sent Lord Rees-Mogg and myself on a mission to dig up what we believed could be the holy grail of economics, with the potential to rewrite the textbooks on economic thinking. And in Lost for 2 Centuries, you'll learn all about it. So what have you got to lose? We hope you'll join us. With strategic investment, your electronic alerts, and your 3 free investment reports, you'll have all you need to see you through the momentous megapolitical shift ahead.